Welcome to the Sacred Slope, where the slippery slope becomes sacred ground. I'm Alexis Rice, and if you're new here, this is a space where we explore the global, diverse, inclusive body of Christ beyond just one dominant lens. There are over 2 billion Christians worldwide across more than 45,000 denominations. We don't all agree. We don't all worship in the same way or have the same views over many, many issues. But at our best, we share a commitment to love, justice, mercy, and care for others, as well as servant leadership. And right now, especially in the U.S., there is one expression of Christianity that tends to hold the microphone and the funding. It's often tied to politics, power, and Christian nationalism. This podcast exists to widen that lens, to show you there is so much more, and there are so many thousands of lenses through which people celebrate and embody our beautiful faith. So if you've ever wondered, is this really all Christianity is? The answer is no. And that's what we explore here. We've had conversations with pastors, theologians, artists, politicians, and leaders across traditions and cultures and countries, all asking what it looks like to live out of faith that actually reflects the fruit of the Spirit, that reflects loving our neighbors as ourselves, that reflects compassion, dignity, and justice. And we hold on to a simple philosophy inspired by Edwin Markham's poem. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. That's what we're doing here, expanding the circle. And today is a really special episode. We're doing something a little bit different. We're part of a Podcastathon, which is a global initiative where thousands of podcasts around the world are highlighting charities this week, people and organizations that are making a real difference in this world. So today, we're bringing together both global and local impact. I got to choose who I wanted to highlight, and we're starting with one of my very favorite nonprofits that I've been supporting for many years, International Justice Mission. We're going to talk to Miguel Lau, working around the world to combat human trafficking, violence, and exploitation. Then we're hearing from some of your favorite pastors, voices I know so many of you are here for and that you already follow and love. I've linked to full episodes with each of them in the show notes. We're going to talk to Pastor Sarah from New Mexico, part of the United Church of Christ denomination. Then we'll talk to Reverend Joseph Yu from the Episcopal tradition in Texas. After that, we're going to hear from Pastor Joe Smith, Post-Evangelical or non-denominational, from Florida. And finally, Reverend Joe Graves from the United Methodist tradition in Ohio. Across all of these conversations, you're going to hear about real work happening on the ground right now in communities and around the world. Before we begin, I would love to name something. The world feels really, really heavy right now. There is so much outrage. There is so much death. There is so much overwhelm. There is so much pain. And it can feel like everything is urgent, everything is broken, and nothing we do actually matters. And it's easy to despair. It's easy to capitulate or just shut down or ignore what's going on. But I want to offer a different posture today. There's a story about a father and a son walking along the beach, and it's covered in starfish, and the son starts throwing them back into the ocean one by one. The father says, "There are thousands of them on this beach. What difference does it make?" The son throws another one in and says, "It made a difference to that one." That's what today is all about. Not carrying the whole world on our shoulders, just doing something. And maybe not even doing something, just enabling someone else to do something, because it matters. There's also the story in the Gospels of the widow who gives just a few small coins, and Jesus says that it matters. And a parable of the talents, this reminder not to bury what we've been given, but to use it. We are to be good stewards of our money and of our time and of our talents as Christians. And I was listening back to this episode. I had moments of like, wow, these people are doing such incredible work. And also like, what did I do today compared to what they're doing? But really, not all of us are called to that work, but we are invited to participate. So as you listen, I'd like to ask you to consider deciding on one thing. What can you offer? How much could you offer? You maybe want to decide right now on $5, $10, $50, $100, and then you can listen to this whole episode deciding what to allocate that amount to by the end of the episode, if that feels right for you. You may not get excited about every single initiative, but notice what moves you. What do you feel drawn to? You don't have to support everything. You don't even have to be a Christian. Thank you all for being here. If this resonates, please share it with someone who might want to see a broader picture of faith. Let's get into it.
There's beauty in unraveling, safety in the questioning. Home is where you're wandering. You're right where you're supposed to be. You're right where you're supposed to be.
There's a lot of misinformation about human trafficking, so let's break it down, Noah.
Human trafficking always involves kidnapping.
Myth. Human trafficking doesn't always start with someone being snatched off the street. It often starts with an abuse of trust. It starts with a fake job opportunity. It starts with someone being lured away from their home. And there's so many different forms it can take, which is why it can be so hard to detect.
Human trafficking only happens in faraway places.
Not true. Human trafficking can happen all around us, all over the world, in so many different communities. It can take place in homes, it can take place in farms, factories, even online spaces. If we always look for it somewhere else, we miss when it's happening right in front of us.
If someone is being paid, it isn't trafficking.
This is a big one, and it's false. If someone is being controlled, manipulated, threatened, or they can't leave in any way, it's still human trafficking. Payment does not equal consent.
Victims will ask for help if they need it.
I wish that were the case, but often it's simply not possible. Victims of human trafficking can feel trapped by their fear, by feelings of shame, by debts, and even by threats of violence. Speaking up can feel impossible. That's why strong justice systems and strong support systems are so important.
Justice can stop trafficking.
This is true. We have dozens of studies and thousands of survivors who will tell you that when justice systems are strengthened and traffickers are held accountable, trafficking becomes harder to commit and people are safe. This is the work that IJM does every day.
Welcome back to the Sacred Slope, friends, where the slippery slope meets sacred ground. I'm Alexis Rice, and today I'm honored to shine a light on a group that many listeners may already know and support, International Justice Mission, often called IJM. IJM is something that I have seen since the CEO, Gary Haugen, came to my church at the time. It was a Presbyterian church, and talked about international justice work. And I just fell in love with the initiatives. And I've been donating and following it for many years. So I'm so excited today to have the head of church partnerships, Miguel Lau, with us today. Hi, Miguel.
Hi, Alexis. Thanks for having me on. So excited to be on the podcast.
Thank you for being here. Muchas gracias por estar aquí.
Y es un placer para mí. Gracias.
So I'd like to tell people a little bit more about International Justice Mission. IJM works around the world to protect people in poverty from violence, human trafficking, forced labor, and other forms of exploitation. They partner with local authorities and justice systems to rescue victims, hold perpetrators accountable, and help communities become safer for the long term. Miguel helps communities of faith understand the global justice issues at stake and how they can be part of the solution. So, Miguel, I'm really grateful that you're here.
Glad to be here.
For listeners who may have heard the name IJM, but don't actually fully understand the work, can you tell us what IJM actually does do around the world?
IJM is widely considered as one of the largest anti-trafficking and anti-violence organizations in the world. But the second thing that people often don't know, we are a community of spiritual formation. Rather than thinking about it as a justice organization that does spiritual formation, we're the other way around. We're a Christian community that feels called to this work of justice. And I think that's where a lot of my story actually begins. I actually was a pastor for about 8 years before I joined IJM. I was pastoring in northern New Jersey. Loved that church. They mentored me into ministry. But, very quickly in the midst of my own engagement as a pastor, one of the things that I started to, I guess I would call it a little bit of an itch. I struggled with this question of is this really all there is to ministry? Is it all just about making nice people who marry other nice people and have nice kids who marry other nice people? Is that really kind of the extent of ministry? Or is there something else that we're supposed to be about? And then in the midst of that wrestling in ministry, I encountered IJM at a pastor's conference, and I got to hear about this core problem of violence. I got to hear some of the stories of the cases that IJM was addressing. And it opened my eyes to two critical things. First, it opened my eyes to all the pain and the violence that surrounded me and my church community, that oftentimes in a suburban church, we're actually trying to escape. And second, it opened my eyes to the fight against violence, and that fighting against injustice was actually what the church was supposed to be about. To put it another way, where the kingdom of God is, then these things, violence, pain, suffering, slavery, these things should not be. We as the church are supposed to be about engaging and in ending this kind of violence. I actually love the way that Jim Martin puts it. He wrote a book called Just Church for IJM years ago. He's now our director of spiritual formation. And he says the church is wired for life and death struggle. That's part of who we are as a calling. And it was out of that I really felt called into this work. I actually initially gave 2 years to go to India. I worked with one of our forced labor programs there, helping to build up our community engagement program, working with communities around Bangalore, India, and how they were becoming aware of the issue of forced labor. And I was hired at headquarters, and I've been there for the last 12 years.
And you are in Washington, D.C. right now, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Do you do any work on the Hill?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do quite a bit of work. We don't do our casework domestically, but we do a lot of work in terms of advocacy and awareness, and especially our engagement on the Hill and engagement with congressmen and senators, and helping them to see how laws in the United States, and really this goes for many countries around the world who have tremendous influence actually to affect change in the global South, and actually to leverage the resources and the power and the influence that they have to actually push real change downstream in places like El Salvador and Colombia, Uganda. They can do that by, one, funding the right kinds of projects, right? And directing funding to not just IJM, but there's a number of great organizations out there that are working on trying to certainly do poverty alleviation, but also addressing forms of violence against the poor. And so but then also the influence that the United States actually has, and Canada and Australia and the UK, the influence that they have actually in their diplomatic sense, that they can actually push for real change on the ground in these countries that would actually protect people.
Something that I was really struck by when I first learned about IJM is the reality about how widespread trafficking and forced labor and violence are globally, especially against the poor. What are some of the realities that people should understand about the scale of these issues and why your work is so essential?
That's a great question, Alexis, and I think it frames why IJM exists really well. When we think about the problem of violence, the thing that people need to remember is that the threat of violence is actually a part of everyday life for people who are poor. It's as much a part of poverty as hunger, disease, or homelessness. This is not the violence of war or genocide, but common criminal violence that is already against the law, crimes like slavery, violence against women and children, and police abuse of power. In many communities around the world, criminals expect no consequences for these crimes. Laws are not being effectively enforced, so they continue to enslave and abuse people who are poor. And people in poverty are uniquely vulnerable to this kind of violence because while their wealthier neighbors can pay for security and safety, they can't. When the justice system isn't working, they have no one else to turn to. Some of the statistics around this, by the numbers, human trafficking is the second largest and fastest growing criminal enterprise globally. It's ranked second only to drug trafficking. The startling reality is that there are currently 50 million people who are held in slavery through threat of violence, and 1 in 4 of those victims are children. 750 million women and girls endure physical and or sexual violence each year. On the financial side, $236 billion are generated annually in global profits from forced labor and sexual exploitation. Again, just let me say that one more time. $236 billion are generated annually in global profits from forced labor and sexual exploitation. That's more than Amazon, Meta, Google, and Walmart combined.
Hmm. I know this is going to get uncomfortable and difficult, but I would like to have the audience understand more specifically what you mean when you say human trafficking, sexual exploitation of children, slavery. Like sometimes you hear these terms in our day and age and you're like, what are you talking about? Right? Especially when we live in certain parts of the world where we're just so cut off from understanding even what you're describing. But this is, like you just said, the reality for millions and millions of people around the world who wonder, like, where is God? Where are the angels? Where are my fellow Christians? So would you mind talking about, a couple stories that have been impactful to you?
Yeah. One story that jumps to mind, behind all of those numbers, there are actual people whose lives are being reduced through exploitation to mere profit and pleasure. One of those people that I'd like to tell you about is a woman named Rimu. Rimu is from a small village in Indonesia. And at 28 years old, she was the oldest of 7 children and fighting to get her family out of poverty. In this situation, a recruiter from her village actually approached her and said, there's a job you could do in Malaysia. It would be doing domestic work, cleaning homes, caring for the elderly. But she was promised fair pay and decent work as a caregiver for the elderly. And Rimu thought, from this familiar face, right, offering her this tremendous opportunity, that she had landed her dream job abroad. Stable work, good pay, and a chance to help her family out. Sadly, it was all a lie. As soon as she arrived in Malaysia, her passport was seized and she was locked in a room with other workers. What started out as an exciting opportunity quickly turned into a nightmare of trafficking and abuse. Rimu and the other people being held with her were sent out every day to clean homes, and they worked every single day without pay. Often, when someone slipped up, they were beaten. One day, while she was taking out the trash, she met a neighbor and she asked if she could borrow their phone. She sent a message back to her cousin in Indonesia, and that cousin just happened to have gone to an awareness event where they were learning about human trafficking from IJM. That cousin reached out to IJM, and that set off a rescue. IJM and our partners worked with local police in Malaysia to intervene in Rimu's case. And within days of that phone call, Malaysian police stormed the house, arrested her traffickers, and Rimu and everyone who were held with her, they were freed. IJM's support team helped Rimu and the others through the legal process, and they supported her case. She even testified in court and went face to face with her abusers.
Wow.
And later, she gave powerful advice to Malaysian prosecutors about how the justice system can be more compassionate to survivors. Rimu's story is a good example of how IJM's model actually works. And you could just break it down to 4 key things. First, of course, when we encounter a case like Rimu's, we work to rescue and restore those victims from the situation of violence they've been trapped in. The second thing, of course, is we're working not just to rescue the victims, but actually to bring their perpetrators, the people who have abused them, to justice, to make sure that they're held accountable for the crimes. And then third, working to strengthen justice. We use those cases to target weak points within the justice system, and then work with justice system leaders and community leaders to design improvements that serve survivors and deter criminals and dramatically reduce and decrease violence. Finally, we work with all of that. We raise awareness about how the change is happening, and we scale the demand for protection. We use people of influence. We work alongside community leaders so that they themselves are actually demanding better action. All of that together, we're actually able to combat cases like Rimu. The 2 other cases that spring to mind when I think about the work, especially that we do in trafficking, in commercial sexual exploitation, we've just started a program in Bangladesh. We've historically worked on issues of commercial sex trafficking, but in Bangladesh, our program is newer. And we had a case actually just recently, got a tip on a case of abuse that was happening at a spa. And after confirming at least 1 minor was actually being sold for sex, IJM worked with the police and survivor leaders to plan a joint operation. What we found was actually worse than we imagined. It was quite a heartbreaking case. Police believed that several girls and women were being held captive and they're being forced to see multiple customers daily. The survivors were lured with false job offers and they were trapped and controlled by traffickers. you'll hear kind of some of these common themes, right? These cases play on, especially trafficking cases, often play on the hopes and dreams of the people who are being victimized by these crimes. They're being trapped through the use of the very thing that they want to do is to help their families, perhaps develop a livelihood, a career. Another case was of a Burmese man who was convicted of trafficking a 17-year-old boy from Myanmar to work in Thailand. This boy was being forced to bread on the street, and he was physically assaulted if he failed to meet daily sales targets. Now you can imagine if you're ever in Thailand, street vendors are very, very common, and you would
Yes.
imagine that this child is being trafficked. But actually, that's what was going on. After he confided in a neighbor about his case was reported, the trafficker was convicted, and the boy was rescued. And IJM in Thailand provided aftercare. And that's just, from our counter trafficking work. We also do work on violence against women and children, a project on police abuse of power in Kenya as well.
Wow, that's amazing. This is really ringing a bell, I think, more than ever because of the Epstein files and because of the abuse here.
It's a case that we haven't been working on. Certainly we want to see any perpetrator of violence and exploitation brought to justice. And I think that what is a common characteristic when you think about the Epstein files is it's a person of power and it's a person of influence who believed that they were untouchable because of that power. And what IJM's work around the world is trying to do is to prove that no one is beyond the hands of God in delivering justice. That though it seems like these systems are broken and they will never work and they'll never deliver justice, what we've actually seen time and time again is you actually can turn those wheels of justice. You can actually get them spinning again. You can find the good people within those systems who actually want to do something about those cases and can actually bring justice to bear. And especially when it happens in these situations of powerful people, it sends a powerful signal, especially to the vulnerable community, that these kinds of crimes are no longer tolerated. Whenever I think about that case, I think about how there are so many, unfortunately, tragically, Epsteins around the world who believe they can operate with impunity. And what I know biblically, right? What I know from my experience of 14 years at IJM is that no one escapes justice, finally and ultimately. There might be setbacks in the moment. There might be heartbreak in the moment. Certainly, we've gone through that. I've seen cases that don't end the way that we want. But we know fully and finally one day they will face judgment. That's our hope.
I imagine some people are thinking like, oh my gosh, this is super interesting. But like, why does IJM have to be involved in this at all? What would happen if IJM were not involved? Shouldn't the police be handling this? Shouldn't the countries be handling this? What happens when organizations like IJM are not present and when systems of justice are weak or non-existent? What's the value add of IJM when you go into work with local partnerships?
I think it's important to, again, go back and acknowledge this. We don't do anything without the local authority. We have no power to do this work on our own. So we're not charging in and kicking down doors because the challenge is, as to go back to this, I was saying at the beginning, if the justice system is not working, then the people living in poverty have no one else to turn to. They don't have the resources to buy private security. They don't have the resources to try to force the system to work for them. And so we need to get the justice system to work sustainably over time and actually transform it so that once we're gone, right, and one day we will be, that system continues to function and continues to protect people from violence. That's an important thing to realize first and foremost. The second thing is, again, Rimu's case, for example, it's not uncommon. It's important to realize that these kinds of pervasive, exploitative forms of violence, they not only harm the people in those situations like Rimu, they also hold whole communities hostage in cycles of poverty and exploitation. For many people living around the world, unchecked violence threatens to undermine the good work of other poverty alleviation initiatives. And just to give you a couple examples, right? Economic empowerment and development projects cannot actually help families who are trapped in trafficking and exploitation. Children can't thrive in schools when they fear that their abuser is present.
Oh,
Violence robs them of their safety, their dignity, and their opportunity to learn. And then just to turn to another type of project that I'm quite passionate about, I love ministries that work on water projects and water sanitation and health. But those initiatives end up falling short when communities live under the threat of violence. Even the most well-designed programs cannot thrive when women and children risk assault on their way to water points.
Yes.
And so violence can undermine all of these other things. If it's left unaddressed, all these other great projects can't thrive. They can't deliver on what they want to do. But changing this equation by protecting people from violence can have a powerful impact. As local authorities become more effective, a new precedent for justice becomes established, and perpetrators are held accountable, crime is deterred, and daily life actually becomes safer for people like Remu.
You said that you work with churches, within church partnerships. Why do you think faith communities have such an important role to play in justice work like this specifically?
I love this question. This is the heart of the work that I do. I talked about that kind of initial question that I was haunted by, right? Is this really all there is? And feeling this conviction that this is the work of the church, right? But then I got a different kind of question that started to bother me, right? And this is the question that I think that we talk about with churches all around the world. When we think about people like Remu, when we think about people who are trapped in slavery and exploitation, when we think about women and children who are vulnerable to violence and are not being protected, how is it that people like Remu can actually know for certain that the gospel is actually true? That Jesus really rose from the dead, that he really is actually making all things new. That's what we say. The gospel is the good news of the coming and kingdom of God, that Jesus rose from the dead, he's making all things new. How can that become real for a person like Remu? There's one particular passage that I turn to often when I think about this, and that is Exodus 3. This is when God is calling Moses from the burning bush. Moses, when we encounter him in this passage, he's experienced profound dislocation in his identity. He is a Hebrew, a survivor of genocide, who grew up in Pharaoh's court around privilege and influence. But now, when we encounter him in Exodus 3, he's living in exile in the wilderness while his people are suffering in slavery back in Egypt. It's into that space that God calls out, Moses, Moses, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. I have indeed seen the suffering of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave life, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them. The cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites. There's two key things I want us to pay attention to. First, God sees the oppression. He sees the violence. He hears the cries of the poor. This is not a distant God. This is a God who is intimately aware of that violence and intends to do something about it. It breaks his heart. He sees the suffering of people like Remu. These are not people who are suffering anonymously or invisibly. God hears their cry and he knows them by name. But the second thing we learn is actually God sees Moses. He sees us. Right? God tells Moses he sees this injustice, he sees the pain, he sees the suffering of his people, and he intends to do something about it. And then his plan is really kind of interesting. He says, so I'm calling you to now go to Pharaoh and to tell him to set my people free. It's a little bit weird, right? Moses probably reacts the way that the rest of us would react. Okay, God, all-powerful being, creator of the heavens and earth, you intend to do something about this injustice, and you're sending little old me. I don't understand. So Moses asks a natural question. He says, who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? And this is the question I think we've all wrestled with, especially when we're faced with the full, brutal reality of suffering. Who am I? Who am I that I should enter into this situation? What can I possibly do to change this? Who am I that I should go and do this thing? And I find it profoundly fascinating that when you look at the passage, God does not answer the question in the way that Moses would expect. Moses asks the question, who am I? And what does God say in return? I will go with you. I will go with you. I, the God who sees suffering, I, the God who has the power to do something about it, I will go with you. It's not just a declaration of what God will do and how he will do it. In a way, this is the answer to Moses' question because it's relocating Moses' identity within this calling. You are a child of the God who sees injustice and intends to do something about it. This is our heritage. This is Moses' heritage. This is our heritage in the church. This is deeply important for us at IJM, and I think for the church to remember that this is our identity. No matter where we come from, no matter what the background in our story, we are actually part of a larger story. We're part of God's story. We're children of the God who sees injustice and intends to do something. And the power, more importantly, the power to do something about that injustice does not come from us. It comes from God. Though we may feel small before injustice, he promises to go with us. He reorients our whole lives and our callings around the fact that we are his people. He is our God. He desires for us to be set free and also to be sent out to set others free as well. This is why I get so passionate about this, because this is the church's calling. All over the world, what I get to see, what I've gotten to witness, is the people of God, his church, rising up to care for and protect people suffering from slavery and violence. When we partner with God to rescue and restore an 8-year-old boy being exploited on Lake Volta in Ghana, we're showing up as a living expression of the gospel to him. Protecting a vulnerable girl and a woman from violence in Colombia ushers her into the tangible lived reality of God's care and redemption. It makes it real for her that God sees her. Rescuing men and women from a forced scamming compound in Cambodia embodies and reveals God's deliverance and hope for them. And works of justice, as we partner with the God of justice, are gospel-centered acts of redemptive work for those who are experiencing violence in the world. So again, to go back to that question, what does the gospel look like for the person who's suffering from violence, oppression, and slavery? How can they know that there's a good God who sees their suffering and hears their cry and will rescue them from it? When we, as God's people, God's church, rise up in God's name and by God's power, do something about their suffering. This work is the gospel. It is the good news.
Yes. Amen. And you know what? A lot of people who are listening to this podcast have, been affected by some sort of church hurt and wonder where God is. But I know there is an ember inside all of us, a sense of justice. And there is something there that is bigger than ourselves. And even if we're deconstructing, having trouble trying to figure all of this out because the world is messy and complicated and painful right now, I know that our sense of justice is strong. And I appreciate the work that you're doing, because I really do believe that instead of just going and telling people about, hey, God is real to you, it's like, no, we are supposed to show up. And what I think is great is that, for someone at home right now feeling depressed and overwhelmed with the world and like, what can I do? Maybe they're not supposed to be the ones going out and doing all this work that you're talking about, but maybe they can donate $5 a month, $10 a month, $50 a month, $100 a month. How can they do that? And what would that money go to? Like, what is that actually going to? One of the things I do want to throw in is that I was very excited when I heard that that was partly going to lawyer advocacy for people to show up for people who were sexually abused. I could imagine a woman who had been raped and has truly no one. I mean, you can even look at the United States, people still don't get the right resources. Imagine being in a country where there's truly no one to help you. And to be able to have those resources being paid for to care and advocate for this woman.
And even just to say, I want to briefly touch on this, because something you said there about, especially as we potentially are going through the sense of deconstruction of our faith and a rebuilding of, what do we actually believe? I think that's the reason why that passage to me is so important, is it just focuses on this relocation of our identity, right? Dislocation and relocation. That in the midst of this, God sees us and he loves us. And he's relocating our identity within not a power structure, not a denomination, but he's relocating our identity in him as his beloved. Yeah, I mean, just to think about how people can help. And I think, you made a really great point there. When you think about the gift that you give, and giving is one of those ways that you can really transform the life of people around the world. When we think about, I'm going to fund a lawyer. If you're in a Western context and you're thinking about the costs of this, you don't realize actually what kind of outsized impact your gift can have. It is really transformative. Even the smallest gifts can be transformative in the spaces where we work. And it is going to things like funding social workers who are actually counseling and working with our survivors. It's going to lawyers who are actually representing those cases in court. It's going to investigators who are actually collecting the evidence that police need to be able to move forward on these cases. It's going to our partners who collaborate with us and ensure that survivors are well cared for and that they're restored to safety. I used to be in the grants world and just thinking about every dollar and how it was being efficiently used. And you would just be amazed at what kind of an impact even the smallest gifts can have, but tremendous outsized gifts as well. We've seen churches around the world who said, I want to be part of the transformation of a place like Peru. And so churches that are giving very large gifts, donors that are giving very large gifts and saying, I want to be part, but it can be all of those things. Certainly, if people want to get involved in that way and they want to give, one of the easiest ways to do that is actually to go to our website, www.ijm.org, and you can actually donate there. There's a section on the site where you can actually donate to IJM's mission. You can find out a little bit more information about us and how your gifts would be used. The second way that I often tell people about is you can pray. I often say that as the first thing. It's not just a group of well-meaning people, but this is actually the power of God being unleashed in the world. There's the story of the loaves and fish. And we can talk about these small gifts that we bring to God, and he turns them into a miracle. We are committed to prayer. Actually, at IJM, we pray for an hour out of every day, half an hour on our own and half an hour corporately. But we also ask our supporters to pray for us in some of our most difficult cases, our most intractable situations. We pray. And so you certainly can be praying for IJM as well. You can follow us on social media. Look for the IJM handles on Facebook and on Instagram and on Twitter. I guess we call it X now. You look at all these kinds of spaces for following IJM and spreading the word about our work. You can get involved in advocacy as well. You can actually join the conversation, change the narrative about violence, that it is not something that's inevitable, but it can be stopped.
Awesome. Is there anything else that we didn't hit that you really wanted our listeners to know about?
When you're in this work, the temptation is to lose hope because you really do encounter very difficult situations. I think I want us all to remember that there is tremendous hope. And actually, there's a deep hope that fuels our community at IJM in particular. It's not just the hope of rescue. We've seen miracles certainly happen. Again, systems that have started to change that no one thought would. We've seen reductions of 50 to 85% in the levels of violence in 9 projects that we've finished around the world. Thanks to the support of our donors and our partners, we've brought freedom to nearly 500,000 children, women, and men who are suffering from violence around the world, and protection for over 10 million people, preventing them from ever experiencing the abuse in the first place. Those are all exciting, and they bring us great joy when we hear those success stories. But actually, the thing that I get super excited about is all the people who will never know that we even, because their systems have been transformed and they've actually been protected from violence and they never experience it in the first place. That's what IJM's vision to protect 500 million, 500 million people from violence is actually all about. It's not about IJM getting the glory. It's actually about people being protected and they never experienced violence in the first place. We are never known to them because they grew up in safety and strength and we were able to thrive without the threat of violence. That is our hope. That's ultimately what we're working towards. And I think together, we can actually change the trajectory. We can change it from fear and oppression to flourishing at a pace and scale that the world has never seen before. Together, we can really live out this calling, as Isaiah 117 tells us, to seek justice, to rescue the oppressed. Amen?
Amen. One final question. Which denominations are the best givers?
I don't think I should reveal that information. I will say that one of the things that's been super fun for me has been just how ecumenical Catholics, Presbyterians, Anglicans, Evangelicals, Methodists, Mennonites, everybody, when they light up on this, they see this is actually something that's core to our calling. I mean, it's amazing some of the spaces that I get to operate in. People who are talking to each other that don't normally darken the door of each other's churches. So that's super fun.
I love it. Well, we'll be watching, Miguel, and thank you so much for letting us know about IJM today.
Thanks, Alexis.
I just saw a TikTok that said the rapture's fake. What? You know, this idea that sometime before the world ends, all the good Christians will be slurped up into heaven and the rest of us will be left behind? Well, it's not in the Bible. Don't some American evangelical Christians believe it's real, though? Not until the 1830s, when a guy named John Darby made it up, and a guy named Schofield wrote a very popular reference Bible that included that rapture theology. Darby's ideas didn't come out of thin air. There were influences from the medieval period, but our modern concept of the rapture still comes extremely late in Christianity. But what about in Thessalonians, where it says that God will snatch us up and meet us in the air? Paul's probably being poetic and dramatic there. And don't you think that if Paul was describing a literal party with Jesus in the air, Christians would have mentioned it a little sooner? Also, being left behind in Jesus' time was a good thing. Under occupation, when people were snatched away, they were exiled or imprisoned or enslaved. You wanted to be left behind. Oh, and Jesus never mentions the rapture. So are you saying that most of our ideas about the rapture come from movies or like fan fiction, like the Left Behind series? They definitely don't come from the Bible.
Hey, friends. Guess who we have with us? It's Pastor Sarah. Hi, Pastor Sarah.
Hey.
Thank you so much for being here today. It's so great to see you again.
You too.
I'm so excited to have you back on the show. And I wanted to just ask you about a couple of ministries that you and your church are passionate about in your community.
Great. So we have a pretty small church, but we have a very big impact. And part of the way we do that is that we partner with other organizations. One of my favorite that we partner with is we make food every week for a shelter called CasaQ.org. And it's a shelter for unhoused LGBTQ plus teens. They provide wraparound services, thing from making sure kids are getting to school and getting tutoring, activities, all of that, but also therapeutic work, helping them find housing, helping them navigate the world, and also giving them examples of successful LGBTQ plus adults to help them and people who love them know that there's a future. Every week, my church cooks a meal for them and we take it to CasaQ. And we also do fundraising for them. I think it's a really phenomenal organization. There are not a lot of, in my city anyway, in Albuquerque, we have 2 primary shelters for youth. And if you're also a trans kid, for example, you have extra vulnerabilities. And so having a place where you can really be yourself and walk through all of that is incredibly valuable. So that's a group that I'm a huge fan of, is CasaQ. If you're in the Albuquerque area, you can sign up to cook meals. You can contact us at Church of the Good Shepherd in Albuquerque. The other group that I'm a huge fan of is Mutual Aid of Albuquerque. So Mutual Aid of Albuquerque got started during the pandemic when people couldn't leave their houses. They shop, pack groceries, and then deliver groceries to people. Like, there's no barrier to entry. You can just go to the website, sign up. They also provide fresh produce. So it's not just like you're getting canned goods, you're getting fresh vegetables from gardens of farmers who donate their food. If you need baby formula, they have baby formula. They also pack diapers and hygiene kits. And then they also pack bags for unhoused folks. And then we distribute those around the city as well. Things like hand warmers, right? When it's really cold, but also food and resources. The other thing that Mutual Aid does is they send around messaging. So if there's a health or safety issue in the city, they'll put flyers in there, little zines about how to protect yourself from the cold, for example. It's a way of sharing information. What I love about Mutual Aid, too, is that their philosophy is solidarity, not charity. So like, my church has benefited from Mutual Aid. So Church of the Good Shepherd in Albuquerque has a history of sheltering people in our church building. And we haven't had laundry facilities. And I mentioned this to somebody at Mutual Aid, and they said, oh, we've got somebody with a washing machine, and we got somebody else with a dryer. Do you want them? And I was like, for free? Yes. And they said, well, do you need a crew? We'll have somebody deliver it. And so they got a crew of people and a truck and brought us a washing machine. And then the people who stay on site now have access to laundry, right? And it's a gift from Mutual Aid, right? Could my church have bought our own washing machine? Sure. But Mutual Aid's philosophy is we all help each other, right? Community protects community. It's also been good for me and humbling, really, because whenever I go, they encourage the volunteers to also take food home. The idea is, like, we want to feed you too. And if you don't need extra zucchini or whatever, they're like, well, find something to take home with you so that you're benefiting as well. So that you're not just like the privileged person coming in and helping the poor, unfortunate people. It's like, no, we are all in this together. Our resources are shared, which is sort of the Christian vision, right?
Oh, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, right, the apostles shared everything in common. We talk about, mutual support. Jesus didn't just preach to people, he fed people. And, on Palm Sunday, Jesus didn't have transportation. So he sends the disciples to a village where Jesus is already well known and says, hey, Jesus needs transportation. And somebody's like, oh, here you go. I mean, Jesus is like the divine incarnate. Like, Jesus could have turned a rock into a donkey if he wanted, right? He turned water into wine, but instead he leans on community, because Jesus wasn't just about like giving, but also like benefiting from the care of community. And that's such a beautiful model for how we can live. And we've seen this over and over again. I talked to my church the other day. I said, who in here has a car that somebody could borrow? And a bunch of people raised their hands, right? What else do you have to offer? And somebody said, well, I know I guess she has a sifter. In New Mexico, we have a lot of wind and the dust gets into the rocks. We don't have grass on our yards mostly. It's just rocks. But if they get dusty, then weeds grow in them. So she says, I have this sifter and the whole neighborhood's been using it, but now I'm done. Does anyone need to use my sifter to like sift their rocks and make them less dusty? And somebody else said, well, I have a ladder and, I speak Spanish. I'm a good tutor in math. So it's like all together. I don't have all of those things, but in community, we are so rich. But I think people who are privileged, part of the reason I take my church to volunteer at Mutual Aid is because a lot of us do come from privilege, and it's an opportunity for us to practice receiving hospitality and receiving care as well. I think that's an important thing to do. A lot of wealthy people, they're like, oh, well, I'll just pay somebody to do this, right? I'll just go to the store and buy what I need. Well, somebody may have an extra of what you need. It requires interfacing with another human being. But that's right. Like, that's tricky for some of us. I think if you are wealthy, you can get lazy, but then also isolated because you're not depending on anyone. Our conference minister, when she comes to visit Albuquerque from Arizona, she usually does not rent a car. She relies on the hospitality of the local folks. And then, as a result, she gets to know people in the community that she's visiting. She has budget. She has professional expenses. She could just rent a car and go on her own from place to place. But instead, she chooses to depend on community. And so that's part of why I love mutual aid. And whether you support a local mutual aid group or definitely, Mutual Aid of Albuquerque always needs money. It's amazing. You'll go in and the tables will be packed with food. We also get donations from like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods, the day old bread and stuff like that. But the next day you go in and it's all gone. They distribute it so quickly. So there's always a need. So I'm a huge fan of that.
I love those things. And I also loved your story about community. I think for those of us who grew up possibly in like really large churches, mega churches, not understanding the value of that small community, that small church community, I think it is so special. It's something I've also experienced in my own church that's a small community. My reverend always brings this up to me that she still can't believe I did this, but I broke my foot one time. And I've talked about this on the show. I broke my foot and I drove myself to the to the urgent care. And I told this at my church, and she was like, "Why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you talk to our church community? Like, I would have driven you. We would have driven you. We would have been there for you." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even think about that this is like one of the values of being in church community, doing life together and bringing resources together." A lot of people have left church spaces, but even the community part itself is really beautiful, right?
It is. And it's humbling, right? It's like you getting a ride from someone else. We worry about being a burden to people, but we love to help people. So It's this like, how about you give somebody else an opportunity to connect to community, give them an opportunity to give. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. It's not natural in our culture because we're taught to be self-reliant and we don't want to bother anybody. But people want to be bothered.
It's totally
They
true.
do.
There's a mentality of we are a community, we are together, we want to help each other.
Right. Within reason. I mean, you also, alongside that, have to teach people boundaries and say, all right, this is what we're capable of. There's a situation every now and then in the church where it's like, this is more than we can handle as a community. We need additional help to care for this person. And that's reasonable, right? Like a church can't do long-term, high-skilled nursing for someone, for example, or we aren't equipped for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. As people have left church spaces, the funding has also left, right, with that. And so I do feel like a lot of people who are in progressive kind of mindsets who left church do really want to give and do really want to help. They really care. And so if people would like to donate to some of these, can they do things like this from far away without being Christian, without having their faith all figured out?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So Church of the Good Shepherd in Albuquerque will accept donations from anyone, regardless of faith. There's no test of faith to help out the ministries of the church. And Casa Q, absolutely. And mutual aid, absolutely. There's no value statement. If you want to help, every little bit goes a long way. And the other thing is, at least like my church is also a community center. So we have secular groups that also use the building, like the Sandia Search Dogs, right? So Sandia Search Dogs are a search and rescue team with dogs that go out and help find people who are lost in the mountains. Phenomenal group. They're all volunteer and they work super hard. They do so much training and they meet here and do training with their dogs on our site. So helping this church is also helping groups that aren't necessarily like they're doing things that are in line with our values, but they're not an explicitly Christian organization.
Final question for you today. It's coming up on Easter time. Along with going to my own church service, I would really be excited to watch your church service online. And I was wondering if you just had like a little sneak preview for what you're considering talking about. And if people do want to watch from home, is there a way to do that?
You can watch us from home anytime on YouTube. Search Church of the Good Shepherd Albuquerque. We're live every Sunday at 11 a.m. The music is going to be phenomenal, but it's going to be a message of hope, a message of good news, a message that death is not the final word. Beyond that, we're still working on it. I think it'll also be an acknowledgement for me, at least this year, to remember that on day one, the disciples weren't ready to shout hallelujah. You know, when so I recently lost a dear friend, and it's made me think about the disciples. You know, Mary Magdalene that first morning when she sees Jesus in the garden, and she has all of these mixed feelings because she misses him. He's there, but he's not really there. He can't stay, and just sort of that gut-wrenching feeling. And then the other disciples who are scared for their own lives, and they're hiding behind closed doors, and you know, all of that is in the mix as well. So kind of holding in tension both the hope and like the almost and not yet, that we can sing hallelujah, but also acknowledge our grief.
I'm very sorry for your loss and that you are in a season of grief, praying over you and
Thank you.
everybody who's affected by that grief.
Yeah. But we're people of the resurrection, right? And looking at the big picture, feels like there are a lot of little defeats right now, or even big ones. You know, we're at war. We're trying to keep our neighbors from getting kidnapped. Like there's so much intensity, but it's part of a much bigger story of God's love and justice breaking into the world, and we can be part of it.
Amen. Pastor Sarah, thanks for dropping by today.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Her episode is a few episodes back. It was outstanding. You guys are going to learn a lot about Christian authoritarianism versus Christian resistance too. So
Thanks.
Hi, so welcome to this new series suggested by a parishioner called Little Theologians, Big Questions. And these are questions that kids from church have sent in, and I'm going to answer them and post the answers and questions on here so you can see it. So the questions are in our baptismal font. Here we go. First question is, did Jesus ever did Jesus ever fart or go potty? We are starting off strong. This is a very important theological question. Now, let's see. Christians believe that Jesus was fully human and fully divine, meaning that since Jesus was fully human, he experienced everything that you and I have experienced. So yes, Jesus got hungry, maybe even hangry sometimes. Jesus got thirsty. Jesus got tired. Jesus had to learn how to walk and talk. And yes, I bet you when Jesus was a baby, he had some blowouts. And if you don't know what that is, that's something you should ask your mom or dad. So yes, Jesus was fully human, so he felt everything that we felt. So yeah, he probably, farted and would have to go potty all the time. Okay. If God is everywhere, does God sleep? Oh, wow. Okay, that's very good. So let's see. You and I have bodies, human bodies. God does not have bodies and a body. Our bodies get sleepy and tired, and since God doesn't have a body, God doesn't get sleepy or tired, which is very good news, because if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're scared, that means that God is awake already and there with you. Here we go. Last question for part 1. What is heaven like? Oh, that is such a beautiful question. And think about the moment where you felt the most loved. Maybe a hug, maybe someone saying they were proud of you, maybe a moment when you felt completely safe, when just a moment where you're just overwhelmed by love. Now imagine feeling that forever and ever 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 and ever. Christians believe heaven is life completely surrounded by God's love. So that moment where you feel the most love, that is what heaven's going to be like, but forever. Thus ends part 1 of Little Theologians, Big Questions. I have a few more questions that were sent in, sitting on my desk, and I'll get to that in part 2. If you have questions, send them in.
Dun, dun, dun. Hello! It's Reverend Joseph Yu!
Yay. Hi. Well, thank you for having me back.
So happy that you are back. Did you know that you were one of my very first interviews?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, which was the kindest thing in the world. And we learned so much. So thank you.
Oh, no, thank you for reaching out.
It was all about Reverend Lizzie. That's what got you, I think.
That's true. That's true. She's a firecracker.
Yeah, she's awesome. Well, Reverend Joseph Yu, thank you so much for being here today. So as you know, this episode is a combination of several different pastors and international justice mission. We're highlighting some things that you're doing at your local church. Just love for you to chat a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so we are a church plant that's 4 or 5 years old. The reason why we don't know the age is because we started right in the middle of pandemic. Like our first gathering was online because we couldn't meet in person because everything was shut down. And our first service in person was in Pentecost of 2021. And then we launched regular Sunday services on September 12th of 2021. So we've been meeting in person since September. We are a progressive church in a fairly non-progressive area.
Where are you for people around the world who don't know?
We are in a suburb of Houston called Pearland, but I've been here for almost 10 years and I have yet to see a pear tree anywhere in Pearland. And it's part of the Brazoria County, and Brazoria County down in Houston is a fairly deeply red county. It helped us when we were planting our church to differentiate ourselves from the thousands of churches in our city, because there's only 2 churches and the other churches is our sister church that helped us start it, the Episcopal Church. We're the only 2 churches in our city that are openly accepting and welcoming, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's a lot of churches who have everyone is welcome, but if you keep reading their about us, it's like, oh, everybody's welcome as long as you fall into these 2 categories. We fully celebrate diversity. We fully celebrate people. That's the DNA of our church. We just want to continue to be a space where people who don't have a community space to, be part of. I know that there's a couple of people who are atheists in our church. I know there's some folks who are agnostic and some people who are just Jesus curious right now, like no commitment. They're just curious about this guy named Jesus and how his name has infiltrated every single part of our culture. And we love that. That's the type of diversity that we were aiming for, just being able to create space. So that's one of the things that we are actively trying to do, is to continue to be a safe space for people who may need it. Yes, that's the DNA that this church was birthed from, into. Yeah. Sorry, I'm running out of words because there's so many words that I have to deal with. Like, I realized that a lot of times, like when I have to speak, like all the words I've already used up, so I'm just struggling finding words.
Well, this is what happens to a polyglot, though.
Oh yeah, well, I'm not a
Yes.
polyglot, so
Yes, you are.
I barely speak Korean and I barely speak English too. So
Oh, stop. If you speak more than one language, all those things, they're very difficult. And also the grammar goes out the window. The spelling goes out the window. It's just like, I don't remember which language two N's with or two C's. I don't know. Excellent. Well, tell us a little bit about some of the ministries.
yeah, one of the things that I'm very proud of that we do is on Christmas Eve. It's not really a ministry, it's an event, I guess. And for those of you that may not go to church regularly, Christmas and Easter tends to be our highest attended churches. In the South, where I live, people still go to church on these days. And a lot of times, churches take that opportunity to, get a big offering on that day to help meet their budgets. And no shame in that. That's great. Like you need to take advantage of it. But I think we stole this idea from a United Methodist pastor who's now retired, Mike Slaughter, who was the pastor of Ginghamsburg Church in Ohio. And he was one. I don't know if he started it but he was one of the first persons I've heard say that Christmas is not your birthday. And so their church every Christmas Eve takes an offering, and that offering goes to some place in the community. So we stole that idea, and I've been doing this for pretty much ever since I was a pastor, except for the 3 years in my last Methodist church, who didn't want to risk their biggest payday in order to be missional. But every year we tell people Christmas Eve, we take this opportunity, and every single money that we receive, I was going to say penny, but we don't receive pennies anymore because they're getting out of circulation. But every single cent that we receive, it goes out to someone in the community. And for the last 3 years, it's been reducing lunch debt in our ISDs. And 2 years ago, we were able to eliminate Pearland ISD's lunch debt that they accumulated for that year. And then this past year, we decided to give half of the offering to Alvin ISD. That's the ISD of that's our church is part of. And then the other half to go to our elementary school that's right across the street. And so we were able to eliminate the elementary school's lunch debt because we found out that the ISDs, the districts put the lunch debt on the church, on the school, individual schools to figure out, and that any money that they receive for that reason, the district kind of disperses it as they seem fit. So we wanted to cut out the middleman and just at least eliminate that elementary school's lunch debt. And they told us how much they had, and it worked out. And so we were able to completely take care of that lunch debt. And I just, for me, the fact that we in the United States of America, one of the most advanced countries in the world, that kids have lunch debt is just, it doesn't make sense to me. And these kids, if they do, they're especially like if they're in high school and whatnot, if you have a lunch debt, you can't participate in many stuff. So we just wanted to do something that lets our neighbors know that we are here to help them. And one of the easiest ways to help someone is to just offer financial assistance. And it's really easy work, kind of, because people are coming with the Christmas spirit anyway. But I think it should feel reassuring that a pastor is up there asking for money, but not for themselves, but for someone else in the community. So we call it the impact offering in hopes that we will create some sort of impact with this offering. And we've been doing that since even when we were just online. We took this impact offerings. We first called it miracle offering, but I didn't like that name. And that's one thing that we do on every year. Every Christmas Eve, we'll remind our people that we gather at church today because Christmas isn't our birthday. We're here to celebrate Jesus. And what better way to celebrate Jesus than to be loving neighbors to someone in our community. So that's where that's one of the things I'm proud of, and people really do respond. Last year and this past Christmas and the before that, I shared it online, and we had some people from who's never been part of Mosaic, but connected with me online, have donated money to our impact offering. It helps us feel aligned to our DNA and our mission, be good neighbors.
I love that. Awesome. So if people want to donate to that this year for Easter, how can they do that?
Oh, we don't do it for Easter, just Christmas.
So, okay. Gotcha.
It's because Easter, we should try something for Easter, but a lot of times the baptisms and stuff takes over Easter. I don't think there's a big commercial confusion with Easter and like secular world, whereas Christmas, people say, put Christ back in Christmas, and then they go in debt by buying Christmas presents. It's like, that's not how like if you really want to put Christ in Christmas, like maybe not go out of your means to be consumers. So it more aligns with how to navigate Christmas. But we haven't taken advantage of that for Easter. So now you put something in my head, and maybe we'll figure something out.
I come from megachurch culture. There is always a good reason to find out how to ask people how to be giving. And Easter is a perfect time. Don't be so mainline high church.
That's true. That's funny. I'm going to see how to make it work.
Yeah. Actually, like Easter offerings, I know people would want to be very generous if it's going to something they care about.
Yeah. Well, that's just true in general. Like people look at all the GoFundMes that are successful. Yeah. I just think a lot of times churches' stewardships are very inward driven. Like, oh, we need money to meet the budget or we won't have the lights on. And it's like, no one wants to give to a sinking ship, like change your approach. Don't just ask people to put light bulbs there's no vision behind that. Like give them a reason why.
Yes, give people a reason.
I mean, we're just still trying to figure things out. But the one thing that we consistently want to do is what I said in the beginning, like our DNA is try to continue to create safe spaces for people to come and explore. Again, we leaned into that because that's not readily there for people. Like most churches in our city are very coded evangelical. So, they have all the flashy things and they make you feel like you're welcome. And then again, they carry heavy doctrines and very heavy defined gender roles and very defined definition of marriage and all that stuff. So someone who's queer or someone who is a person of color and not Republican or not MAGA, I should say, they don't quite have spaces. And we're just trying our best to let people know that you will find a home here if you don't have a home. We will be with you. And I've told this to people many times too, like if you come to Mosaic, we'll walk with you for that season. And after that season, if you feel like we don't have what you are looking for, then we will help you find another place. A couple of families have come and gone because we don't have a youth ministry. One, we don't have enough kids to start a youth ministry or pay for a youth ministry director. And I don't want to spend all that time doing youth ministry either. So, it's just like, hey, I know this church. I trust them. They have a more developed youth ministry. If you feel like your family will grow there, I don't hold it against you. Like, I get it. We'll always be that space if you need to come back. But right now, we want to do what's best for your family so that your family can grow in Christ. So here's our church youth pastor. I know very well, and I trust him or her, and you should go to that church and let me know how it is. And if that doesn't work, I know one more church. After that, if that one doesn't work, it might be you that's having problems. But either way, I just want to help people. Grow in Christ. And it doesn't have to be with us. We don't. We will love it for it to be us, but I also know our limitations. We're a young church that has 70 people and we have a children's director and that's all that we can afford right now. So we're making ends meet here and there, but I fully understand some people need something deeper that we can't provide. We want to be the Yoda to your Luke Skywalker. We just want to be that guy, that mentor that helps you. We just want to do everything we can to help someone become the person that God always intended them to be.
You were very humble about, saying don't ask for money for the lights for your church, but I'm going to on behalf of you. So if people do want to help support your church and to be able to grow and to compensate you for your time, how can they donate to your church?
MosaicPearland.org, there's a give button. Now, That's not to say that we don't ask for money. I just wish the older churches would find a better way to ask for money. One of the greatest things that we did for our capital campaign was to have church members for youth group. I had to hunt down youth members who were part of the church and tell them, like, we're trying to revitalize our fellowship hall that was mainly used by the youth years ago. And I was like, look, you didn't invest in these youth directly, but your giving kept this building happening. And look where these youth are. Some of them are in ministry, some of them are doctors, and we had a role in that because we helped form them in the image that God always wanted it to be. So we're still asking for money. We're not saying, hey, we need your money to meet the light bulbs, but you're investing in God's kingdom. And look what your investment has done with these youth and things like that. Just be more creative in the way that you ask for money, because people want to be generous, but no one wants to give to a dying boat, a sinking boat, because they're going to think it's a waste of money. So if you're going out there saying, well, if we need to raise $20,000 more, or we're going to have to let go of our associate pastor, that's not like faith. One, you're manipulating them. And two, like, you're just saying that you are a dying organization. Why would I want to give my hard-earned money to something that might not make a difference come next year? So if anyone listens to this and you're part of a church leadership and stewardship season is coming up in a couple of months, traditionally, I think it's October, November, use testimonies of church members, find ways to get people to invest in what the church has done and is going to continue to do, instead of saying we need more light bulbs. You just lost half the people there.
Last question for you today. Easter is coming up. The
Yeah.
Super Bowl for pastors.
Yeah.
It's like the amount of preparation you need. You mentioned that you are one of only a handful of churches, one or two churches in a sea of red. If people would like to go to your church, or people are not close, are they able to watch it online?
Yes, we have a very, very low budget streaming that always gives us problems. We have not gone a whole month without something not working. We're on YouTube at Mosaic Church Pearland. And then we stream on Facebook at Facebook.com/Mosaic HTX. And the funny thing is, this is petty. There's another church that was starting around the same time that was trying to use the Mosaic HTX, which is Houston, Texas. And I didn't know what we were going to call. I knew that we had to keep the name Mosaic because that was given to me by the powers that be. But I didn't want them to have Mosaic HTX, so I took the URL first, and then I haven't let go yet. None of our branding has Mosaic HTX anymore, but I kept that so that the other Mosaic church doesn't get it.
Cheeky Reverend Joseph Yu. By the way, if anybody just needs some laughter in their life, just like, you have the best comments on social media, like just like sneaking in there, especially like on Threads. I see you on Threads and I'm like, oh my God, it's so good.
Well, like, I used to troll people too, like friends like April. You had April's book back there.
Yeah, April of Joy. Let's find her. April of Joy, Star Spangled Jesus.
Every once in a while, April will post something and I'll just be like mean. And I know that April knows that I'm joking, right? But when she hit a certain amount of followers and I comment like that, they would like fill my inbox. And I was like, April, please get your followers off me. Let them know I was kidding. So I stopped messing with April. But I still mess with Tim. Tim made a mistake of giving me his cell phone number. And every once in a while, I'll just text him. Tim has a lot of blackmail material on me. You know, I'll text him with very colorful language, calling him very fun names.
This is Tim Whitaker, everybody, by the way. So
from the new evangelicals,
who also recommended both of us about our microphones and some of our equipment.
And the teleprompter. I had to give props to Tim. He's the one that told me about the teleprompter, and that saved a lot of time for me. So I think I was born to push buttons, but I learned the hard way. There's, like April, I don't mess with her anymore because her followers, she has too many followers that don't understand our relationship. So, but good for her, good for them trying to protect April. Like, I'm like, April, you should be proud, but please let them know I was kidding.
Well, next time I talk to Tim, I'll be asking about the blackmail on you. No, just kidding.
You should. You should ask him about a mug a certain Episcopal priest sent him as well next time you see him.
That's going to happen next time. Okay. Reverend Joseph Yu, thank you so much for coming back and for sharing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
When it came to finding a life partner, many of these women went through a process where the opinions of their fathers and church elders were held in higher regard than their own.
You're turning 17 and it's like the courtship, it's going to start. People are going to start asking. And you're only going to get so many people who ask you.
That's my friend Margaret. She's part of a group called Deconstructing Doulas, who helps survivors of Doug Wilson's white Christian nationalist cult. CNN has a whole documentary about these survivors that was supposed to air twice. And twice, it's been bumped. Before anything else, I want to be really clear about something. I actually messaged with Pamela Brown, the reporter who worked really hard on this, and she didn't have to do that. She told me the documentary will air. It's just been pushed back for coverage of the war in Iran. She's not the problem, but there is a problem. Legacy media is doing exactly what Trump wants it to do. He starts an illegal war with Iran, and all the stories about powerful men abusing women get pushed aside. Again. These women survived years of abuse inside Doug Wilson's religious system. And they have fought for just as many years, if not more, just to be believed. The stories of women who survived abuse in Doug Wilson's cult are being pushed aside to cover a war being led by somebody still in that cult. I know that isn't the intention, but intention is not the same thing as impact. And the impact is that these women are being pushed aside all over again. So here's what I need from you. Tag CNN in the comments and ask them to air it. Tag your pastors, your leaders, other creators, anyone that can help amplify these women. Share this reel, or better yet, go follow them and share their stuff. I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired of watching the vulnerable pushed aside while the powerful remain untouchable.
Hey, everybody. Guess what? We have Pastor Joe Smith with us.
Hey, it's good to be back.
So happy to have you. Joe, you were one of the most special conversations I've had. I've loved watching your content over this time. You're just out there helping people. So thank you.
Appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's good to see you too. I always have a lot of fun talking with you. You're a blast, and then the show's great. So I love the fact that this thing is out here and growing. It's growing, yeah?
We are all growing. It's a thing. You know what? There is a massive demand for progressive Christian people on social media and podcasts that people want to hear. Look at James Tallarico. So we're here for it. I want to hear a little bit about a couple of ministries that your church is part of. I just think it's really important because a lot of churches like yours are doing boots on the ground, really important work, and they're not often highlighted like the big flashy nonprofits. So the purpose of this was to make sure that a couple of ministers who I really love and cherish to talk about the work that you're doing.
I think it's a great idea because the American church has such a bad name and it absolutely deserves it, right? Like we talk about those kinds of things all the time. However, there is a Christianity that exists outside of that. And it's really difficult to like point that out in the midst of all the noise because you don't want to anyway, for me, I don't want to put this on anybody else, but it's almost like that spiritual bypassing of, everything's going to be okay, or kind of pointing away from all of the bad and being like, yeah, but look over here. Don't worry about that. But the reality is that there are many churches and faith organizations that exist outside of, kind of mainstream American Christianity. So I love this idea. I think it's great. So thank you for doing it.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about a couple ministries?
There are several things that we're involved with here in Florida. And as you can imagine, Florida is the dumpster fire that you've probably heard about. In fact, it may even be worse than what you may have heard. The state of Florida is facing a lot of really extreme things happening all at once. We have an affordable housing shortage crisis, homeowners insurance crisis with all of the natural disasters we have here, which is driving all kinds of prices and loan interest rates and everything through the roof. Our state government's not addressing it. So there's a lot of people falling through the cracks. So two of the ways that we address that here in Gainesville, we are directly across the street from Santa Fe College, which is a great college by its own right, but it's also a feeder school into the University of Florida. The campus isn't, like 10 or 15 minutes from us. Depending on where you go and kind of who you ask, the average for college students that experience food insecurity is anywhere between like 40 and 70% of Florida college students, which is a crazy number. And so one of the ways that we meet that is we host, every month we do it through the month, and then we have one big collection day where we take everything over. And so we're taking over, canned foods, non-perishable items, even some school supplies that maybe they could use that instead of having to spend money on the school supply or school supplies, and they could use that for food or whatever. People are asking, well, why don't they just go to the cafeteria? Well, Santa Fe College doesn't have a cafeteria. If you're at UF, you might be able to get on the food plan, right? And then just go wherever. But Santa Fe College doesn't have that. So if they don't have food in the cupboard, they're not eating. And so we help keep the Santa Fe food pantry stocked full.
money comes from your local church, from donations?
Yeah, just donations, or we also ask people because down here in the South we got Publix. I don't know if you know what Publix is, a big grocery store chain, but they do BOGOs all the time. And so what we encourage our people to do, or anybody that wants to participate, is when they go into Publix, if you're buying something and it's BOGO, then grab the other one and then bring it in. Especially because everything is so expensive right now. So it's just a really easy way to be able to give back without really breaking the pocketbook for so many of our people. So that's kind of the main way that we do that. The other one, though, and not that one's not important, right? It's all important. But we have a special place on our hearts for our queer siblings because open and affirming churches in the state of Florida are very few and very far between. And so there are just these deserts all throughout the state where there's no faith community that actually reaches out or loves on people or serves or whatever. So one of the things that I'm really blessed with is a working relationship that we have with two organizations in town, with the Pride Community Center of North Central Florida and with Unspoken Treasure Society. Unspoken Treasure Society works specifically with the trans community, and if you want to even narrow that down, trans community of color. Great relationship with both organizations. One of the ways that we help support the Pride Center is with another group of people. We helped launch the Pride student meetups a few years ago here in town in response to the Don't Say Gay laws that really started affecting the schools. And so once a month, we have a group of students that just come and hang out. And for 2 hours, we literally goof off and eat pizza. Think youth group without any lesson. That's what it is. So just giving them a space to be. Our church kind of funds that program. So we give to that, and then we have volunteers from that as well. But I think even more desperately needed is that support of the trans community, especially right now. So one of the things that we did, besides just the monthly giving that we give them, is that we try to be as creative as possible in our support and how we work with them. And so a few months ago, we held a variety show. And it was called a variety show because the state doesn't like certain words being used around certain kind of entertainment things.
These are the people who believe in small government, correct?
Yes. Ironically, yes, they love small government until it comes to certain, groups of people. But so we hosted one of the variety shows here at the church building, and it was called Glitter and Grace. And it was a packed house. And the performers did amazing. We raised like $2,000 that night. We personally went to the bank and got $300 in ones, and that was gone. So for people changing it out. So whatever people brought plus that's what the performers got. Then there was this one performer who was super shy, and the MC got up there and said that this was the first time that they had performed publicly anywhere. And I want to tell you, it was so, I don't want to be cliche, but it was a really sacred moment where this person got to get up there and do something that they've been working towards. And they were terrified. Like you could see them visibly shaking, but the whole place was so supportive. And just cheering them on and super loud for the entire performance. They couldn't even make it through an entire song. But what they did do, they were just super supportive. And I think they walked away probably with more tips than any performer that night. There were lots of really good performances, but that was probably my favorite just because of the whole situation and what they walked off the stage feeling. That's probably two of the biggest things that we're involved with here locally. And I want to make sure that I want to give a shout out to my other staff members who actually were already doing that before I got here. That was one of the things that we had in common that helped bring this. We merged. So Kevin and Miranda, who are already on staff, that already had a relationship with Unspoken Treasure Society. Because I don't want to take credit for that, but that was something that we were completely aligned with. And I just wanted to make mention of that so that, I didn't walk into the staff meeting and they were like, jerk, what are you doing?
Thank you, Kevin and Miranda. Yeah. And that is so moving. What's so special is to hear that there are pastors and churches out there like you that are so incredibly supportive and in allyship with the queer community. And you just don't hear that often. So thank you for your work. You know, it's funny. We know that one of the major reasons that millions of people have left church spaces is because of discrimination towards the queer community. And I do think that if people knew that there are churches like yours, there would be more of an interest in going, oh, I didn't even know this existed.
You're not wrong.
If people are interested in donating from afar, they don't have to go to your church in order to contribute to these things, right?
No, not at all. Website's probably the easiest. There's a donate button, and it just kind of takes you to a pretty typical Stripe page where you can put in whatever you want. Right off the bat, before anything else is done, 10% of everything is given away. So that's a big deal. That's in our DNA. So we would love people to partner with us in helping support these organizations even more.
That is awesome. And what's the website?
Maisonchurch.com. Meizon, the Greek word. One of the meanings of the Greek word is greater. So that's the thing.
One more question I have is, since we're now in 60 countries, I would love for you to paint a little bit of a picture of what's going on in Florida.
It's funny you mentioned that because General Session just ended here in the state of Florida. And for those that don't know, General Session is where all the representatives come together, and it's basically a part-time job. So they hold session through February, March, and then they might have special sessions. This year's General Session, the only things that occurred were a law was passed giving the governor the ability to declare any organization a terrorist organization. There are no checks and balances. It's very vague. So anybody that goes against traditional values, traditional sexual views, traditional Western views can be designated terrorist organization. Of course, it will be challenged in court, but that was one. The other one was the state stripped all local city governments of their ability to enact any kind of DEI, anything, including if, say, our mayor, who is an awesome guy, decides to recognize Pride Month, which he does every year when we have our big Pride Festival, he declares that day as Pride Day. The governor could remove him from office for doing so. So that's what they're really focused on. Meanwhile, like I said earlier, they did nothing to address it. They didn't even pass a balanced budget. They are calling a special session to actually to pass a budget, which they didn't do. And then there's going to be a second special session because the state of Florida wants to do the redistricting like all the other red states are doing, to gerrymander it even further. So that's taking place too. So in the midst of all of that, here we are, and we're not alone, but here we are trying to do what we do for these people that are literally being targeted by the state government. Yay.
Holy smokes. It's worse than I even realized.
That's just the bills that passed. Organizations and people showed up and squashed even worse ones. So those were just the ones that were able to make it through. But they only made it through because, you really can't win every battle. We won many battles, but those are the ones that made it through.
Well, speaking of battles, I really appreciate your work and continue to be in such awe of the light and the love and the care and the speaking truth to power. Every time your videos come across my feed, I am encouraged and enthusiastic. I am really of the strong belief that angels will come and provide when people are doing good things. I'm putting it out into the universe, and let's see. Thank you for your work.
Thanks, Alexis. You're awesome.
No, you're awesome.
Ash Wednesday is weird because in everyday life, we've moved from dirty to clean. We shower, we wipe our kids' faces. When something's broken, we fix it. But on Ash Wednesday, we do the opposite. We walk into the space clean and then we leave with dirt on our faces. So what's up with that? Well, it's simple. Sometimes life is so overwhelming that you can't fix it and you can't clean it up and you can't make it better. And Ash Wednesday gives us permission to stop pretending and to stop leaning into the tendency to try to fix everything. It allows us to remember that we are but dust, that we are broken, that we are human, that God loves us anyways. And so sometimes the way forward is downward, from dust to new life. So I hope you'll join us for Ash Wednesday here at City View Church.
guess who we have with us? We have Reverend Joe Graves. Hey, Joe.
Hey, how's it going?
It's so great. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love the Sacred Slope.
Well, we love Joe Graves doing some amazing, amazing work. I always loved your episode so much. This is the Progressive Planter, everybody. It's also in Joe's background. That's been out for, gosh, about a year now.
Yeah, coming up on a year. Yep. Last summer, around June, I believe. Late May, early June. I kind of get the dates confused. But yep. Yeah, coming up on a year.
One of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you today is because I really was inspired for this whole episode, partly because of some of the amazing work that you and your church do for partnerships and helping your local community. So I wanted to spotlight some of that and let people know about it. So if they're interested in helping donate, whether they're near or far, they can. And do you have a new book out back there?
I do. Yeah, I do. New book. It's funny because it's so different from my last one, but also very similar. It's different because it's fiction. You launch a book called The Progressive Planter on how to start new faith communities, and you build a little bit of an audience. And then the second one's like, oh, do you guys also like fiction? So it's a science fiction novel in stories that deals with, honestly, a lot of the same themes. It deals with all the isms, racism, ableism. What it is almost, one reader called it, because it's a novel in stories, so it's a bunch of little stories that form a overarching narrative. But one reader called it philosophical parables. I like that. But it just deals with a lot of very big human issues. It uses sci-fi, which places it far enough into the future for us to deal with it without feeling triggered or bothered. Like we can play with it a little bit when it's in the future, but it's really stuff that's happening today. And how do we wrestle with changes in technology and hyperconnection and all of the stuff that we wrestle with. So it's character-driven stories, fans of literature fiction that don't mind science fiction elements. Yeah, it's a fun novel. Currently bestseller on Amazon, metaphysical science fiction, which is philosophical science fiction.
Yes, I saw that. That's so awesome. Can you show us the cover and what is the title of it?
So it is My Family in the End of Everything. There you go. Designed by the same artist as my last book, The Progressive Planter, which is my brother. So he's now responsible for designing all of my book covers moving forward. He's a phenomenal graphic designer. Visual Jams on Instagram if you're interested.
And it seems that you might have partnered with God for the promotion of this book because you live in Ohio and a meteor apparently just hit Ohio.
Yeah, somehow I missed that. I was so distracted by all the snow that Ohio got after being beautiful like 2 days ago. I was outside working in the garden almost. Well, we live in an increasingly existential crisis. That's ultimately what the novel's about, is how do you navigate existential crises. So when you think about everything that's happening in the world, I mean, the meteorite falling in Ohio is one thing, but when you realize that climate change is actually impacting our everyday lives and creating extremes from warmth to extreme colds, you know, there's trees that we have planted in our church courtyard that are starting to die because of global warming.
Wow.
Certain people think it's all like a hoax or political, whatever. Like, no, this is like, we have to figure out in the next 10 to 20 years how to get different trees planted in our courtyard because the trees that have been fine there for years aren't going to survive anymore. And I was talking to an arborist. There's like a Kentucky tree that's not going to grow in Kentucky anymore. It'll grow in Ohio, but Kentucky's going to be too warm for it. And so like climate change is happening, wars and rumors of wars and everything else. It's really a lot that we're trying to wrestle with. And of course, this novel, and I would say in a lot of ways, Progressive Planters trying to ask the question, what does it look like to love one another in the midst of crisis?
Gosh, we need that more than ever. I'd love to hear a little bit about some of your ministry.
If you read the book, Progressive Planter, you'll realize that I believe churches exist to make the world a better place. And so there's 2 ministries in our church and 2 that we partner with that I'm going to mention briefly. The 2 ministries in our church that we're in the middle of launching right now, they both started last year and we're kind of in the early phases of starting. The first one is led by women in our church. Under the current administration, they really felt like certain resources, feminine resources might be restricted in the future. So they proactively started stockpiling everything from birth control to other feminine hygiene products and started making them available for free. So now we have a feminine resource store that we set up once a month at a partner ministry. And, we're giving away a variety of feminine resources from pads to birth control if they want it. But then really, honestly, people are really loving. We're serving a lot of people in recovery.
They're really excited about some of the underwear and makeup and things like that they just don't have in their sober living homes. And so the Feminine Resource Store is a big one. We always need donations, either in kind or in dollar amounts, so they can go buy the supplies that are most needed. So that's a new ministry. We're excited about seeing where that goes. We have experience launching free stores where we provide resources to people, like Little Bottoms Free Store. So this is kind of the next iteration of that, and definitely dovetails with that ministry. The other thing we're in the middle of launching is a religious trauma group, and that one's really big.
No one needs that, right?
Oh, my days. We have a team that's putting together evidence-based, led with input from therapists and social workers on how to create healing spaces for people who've experienced religious trauma, which includes a lot of people in our church community. So we've been doing some processing sessions, and we're developing a handbook that we'll be providing to churches to use to help them create safer spaces for people who've been impacted by religious trauma. So both of those are huge needs, sadly, in the world that we live in, but very important. Two other shout outs I'll give to partner agencies that I think are just doing phenomenal work that we collaborate with. One is the Recovery Ministry, where we set up the Feminine Resource Store. It's called the Hope Dealer Community. They help more people get into treatment out of drug addiction and off the streets in the city of Columbus than I think probably any other organization I'm aware of. In fact, the one number that stands out to me was when my wife got involved. My wife's part of that ministry, and that's how I'm connected to it primarily. When she got involved, they had hundreds of people come in to their drop-in center, which is serving people in addiction, people coming off the street looking for just handouts or whatever. They had hundreds come in every day. And they had probably 20, 30 people in their recovery community, which is the community for people who've gone through treatment, detox, are in sober living, working the steps, all of that. And over the last 3 years, they've seen those numbers flip. They have 300 people now on their Wednesday night recovery meeting, and they only have about 50 or so coming into the drop-in center. And it doesn't mean there aren't other people in addiction, but when she told me that, I was like, that's a huge change. And just watching people leave a life of addiction behind and just getting their kids back. We have a friend who, basically lost her kids, and she's now sober and has been sober for years, and she's getting her kids back, which has become a good friend of my son's. And so now he goes over to their house and they hang out and they play, and she's a phenomenal mom. And I'm just thinking, here's this kid who didn't have a mom 3 years ago. Like, he just didn't have a mom. She was as good as dead. And now he's got a mom, and that just breaks my heart. So they're doing the work of helping people and to move away from addiction into recovery. The other shout out I'll give is to mothers of murdered Columbus children. They are exactly as they sound. They are mothers in the city of Columbus who have lost their kids to gang and group violence or to murder. They've been murdered. They are huge advocates for violence reduction in our city because they are moms who have taken their pain and turned it to purpose. Phenomenal, powerful group of women who are advocating for safer streets in the city of Columbus. So if you're not familiar with Moms of Murdered Columbus Children, definitely check them out. So those are a few of the partners as well as ministries in our church that I'm very proud to be a part of and to support at our church. People who are making a real difference in some, honestly, really difficult places.
Wow. Gosh, I'm so moved, and I will definitely be donating to all of those. I do want to ask you, sometimes people in the United States who tend to be conservative, they're saying, well, donating is not the government's job, it's the church's job. My struggle with just that blanket answer is then how hard is it for churches to be able to get the resources and the funding in order to do all this incredible work? And what would make that easier?
I think it's a great question. The simple truth is that churches are in decline, and especially mainline churches, which tend to be more inclusive and progressive in their theology, while also being a little bit more traditional in their liturgy. They're in decline and they're struggling. A lot of churches can barely afford to pay a full-time pastor, which in the mainline space, a lot of times there's minimum set. Equitable pay is an important value for progressives, that people should be paid for their work. So pastors have equitable pay, and then local churches struggle to pay them, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for mission and ministry. So there's a real challenge. If you identify as a progressive Christian, and it's common for progressive Christians, especially if they're deconstructing, to just kind of do life alone, listen to podcasts, which is great. We love podcasts, Sacred Slope. But I've heard a lot of progressive Christians say, no, I just get what I need from podcasts, or I get what I need from outside of the church. Well, the side effect of that is
religious spaces that are running food pantries, that are running diaper banks, that are running homeless shelters even, that are running warming centers. Like most of the warming centers in the city of Columbus are held in mainline spaces that are more inclusive. That's for people who are homeless, who are going to freeze to death otherwise. The phenomenal ministries are being held in a lot of mainline spaces, and they're struggling. And so one of my challenges to progressive Christians is like, I don't care if you go to church every Sunday, but hopefully, can you at least give every Sunday? What does it mean to support the things you care about? And the thing I know about people is that people want to be generous and they want to support the things they care about. And sometimes we give to things that benefit us directly, and that's fine. But I think real beautiful generosity is giving to things that we want to see in the world. So if you want to see progressive churches or progressive faith-based ministries, find a place and contribute financially, make a difference. A lot of times they'll let you give directly to the missions that are happening. Like in our context, those individual ministries, you can give directly to them. Find something to give towards that's going to make a difference and keep our presence in the neighborhood.
I love that so much. Thank you. And for people who might be listening who aren't local or maybe aren't attending a church, that does not exclude them from being able to give to, for example, the initiatives that you just talked about, right? So what would they do if they want to donate to these causes?
Yeah, well, you can get to our ministries at cityviewcolumbus.org, or if you want to give to the Hope Dealer community, just Google Hope Dealer Community Columbus, Ohio, or Mothers of Murdered Columbus Children. If you Google those, you'll be able to find them. They'll pop right up, and their give link is real big. I work with both of these organizations around their development, so if you could try to go give and you're trouble figuring it out, I want to know, because I'm helping them think through how they can build a strong base to be able to move forward with both of those organizations, specifically working on their development. So you should be able to find them pretty easily and figure out how to give, and if not, you should let me know.
Reverend Joe, you and all the people that you mentioned and who are working with you are angels that we need. And thank you for shedding light on some of these beautiful things. You are the body of Christ with the hands and feet, showing how to help people in need. So thank you for being that amazing Christian example.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. And that wraps up this special episode of The Sacred Slope as part of Podcastathon. Today, you've heard from people doing real, meaningful work, globally and locally. Different voices, different denominations, but the same thread, showing up for others with compassion, courage, justice, and care. So the question now is simple. What stayed with you? What moved you? And if something did, don't ignore it. Head to the show notes. Right now, every organization is mentioned there. Pick one, pick a few more if they really intrigued you. Give what you can. Follow them, share their work. You don't have to do everything, just do something. And if you do, I'd love to hear about it. Tag The Sacred Slope on social media. Say where you gave and why it mattered to you, and I may share it. When the world feels heavy, it's easy to shut down, but remember the starfish story. It mattered to that one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being the hands and feet of Jesus, wherever you are in your journey. Because loving our neighbors as ourselves is how we show that we love God. Visit podcastathon.org to discover more charities through incredible podcasts around the world. I'm Alexis Rice. Go in peace, friends.
There's beauty in unraveling, safety in the questioning. Home is where you're wandering. You're right where you're supposed to be. You're right where you're supposed to be.
Oh, and if you like this content, make sure to follow The Sacred Slope on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at The Sacred Slope. You can watch on YouTube or Spotify, and you can listen on Apple and everywhere you get your podcasts. Till next time.